in the matter of Gorbach versus Dagrapont. Parties have been sworn in, Judge. You may be seated.
Mr. Gorbach, you were hired by the defendant, according to your complaint, to be Santa during Christmas season at his store or mall. Is that right, sir?
Mall.
Is this your mall? Do you own the mall?
No, I don't,
No.
Your Honor.
Well, what do you do with the mall?
I operate a photo promotions company that specializes doing Christmas and Easter promotions in shopping centers.
And how long was the Christmas season?
6 weeks.
Okay. And you claim, Mr. Gorbach, that you quit.
Yes, ma'am.
And when you received your final paycheck, you were shorted in pay. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Your defense says he gave you absolutely no notice, and that caused you some damage to your business.
Correct.
When did you start working for him, sir?
I started work on November 13th.
Did you answer an ad in the paper? Is that how you got the job?
No, I had visited the mall a number of times, and one of the photographers had called me over and told me to call Mr. Dagrapont if I was interested in being a Santa Claus.
And you did?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And were your duties explained to you?
Well, the only thing we discussed was pay. I was over the phone, and he had quoted me $12 an hour pay plus overtime and a bonus at the end of the shooting in insurance.
What kind of bonus?
Well, it was dependent on the amount of money they made.
Okay, never accept a bonus based upon what somebody else tells you they're going to make.
Yeah.
That's not smart business. Okay, so you worked for a while, and what happened?
Well, when I first started working there, I kept time. In fact, I kept time the whole time I was working, the amount of hours I worked and the days that I worked. And when I got my first paycheck, I noticed that the pay was not $12 an hour, I was told. No overtime was included. It was only $8 an hour. So when I talked to Mr. Dagrapont about this, he told me that I had misunderstood and that he had told me $8 an hour, but there'd be $1 an hour raise every year, and at the end of 4 years, I'd get $12 an hour.
At the end of 4 years?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Well, this was, you know, an oral agreement, and I figured, well, I didn't have anything to back up on, and I was having a ball. I enjoyed being Santa Claus at the mall.
Were you working at another job as well?
I had a couple of daycare centers that I did Santa Claus for, and I enjoyed doing that. I've been doing that for years.
Okay, but other than that, you had no regular job?
No, ma'am, I'm retired.
You're retired. Okay.
So I decided, well, like I said, it's an oral agreement. I can't back him up on it.
So you decided to work
So
for
I decided to go for the $8 an hour.
Okay.
So about 2 or 3 days later, Mr. Dagrapont came up there and told me, Santa Claus is smiling too much. Quit smiling. I said, well, you know, everything I've read about Santa Claus, he's a jolly old elf. And I enjoyed having fun with the kids and all. And being as I was having fun, I would continue doing it. But when the job quit being fun, I was going to quit. So that ended that discussion. And then I think it was the following Thursday, when I was getting ready to leave the mall, 2 of the people in the mall came to me and told me I was going to hear some very bad news the next day, that they had overheard Mr. Dagrapont talking to one of the little girl photographers.
All right, well, don't tell me what anybody else told you. What happened the next day?
Well, that Friday, Mr. Dagrapont was in, and nothing. He worked there about 4 or 5 hours and left, and I didn't hear anything. But when we were closing down that night, one of the little girls called me over, the photographer called me over and said, Mr. Dagrapont says he wants you to stay on the seat, the Santa Claus sled, the whole time you're here. Don't get up and go visit the children. Don't go visit the adults. You know, that'd be taken away from time. But when we're not taking pictures, that was fun. In fact, I encouraged quite a few people to come and get pictures by just going out there and visit them.
So you went out in the crowd?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Well, I stayed within the confines. We had a little fence, and I stayed within that.
But you didn't just sit in the sled?
I didn't sit in the sled the whole time.
Okay. And this was one of his employees that told you?
Yes, ma'am.
That you were to stay in the sled and not
Yes, she said
mingle.
She was informed by Mr. Dagrapont to tell me that this was the new regulations.
Okay. And you did, in fact, tell somebody that he was to stay in the sled?
As required by a contract with the shopping center.
Whatever. You did, in fact, make that statement.
Did.
I just want to make sure. So it was after that, sir, that you quit?
Yes, ma'am. I called him that night and asked him what was the reason behind this. He told me the same thing. This is a requirement of the mall. And I said, well, I told you before, when the job quit being fun, I quit. So we had a lengthy discussion, and I told him, you know, tonight's Friday, have somebody else out here Saturday.
Okay.
And I quit.
Now, when you quit, sir, on that Friday, how much were you owed?
I had 46 hours I had worked at that time, according to my schedule.
Okay, so 46 hours, and it was $8 an hour that you agreed to work for.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's $368, right?
Every day.
Okay. All right, Mr. Daguerrepoint, let's hear you.
Your Honor, Mr. Gorbash is a wonderful Santa Claus, and we really enjoyed having him work for us. But he has a little problem with math. I've brought the official records that are kept by the managers in the booth, as well as a copy of how he added the hours up, and I think if you look at it, you'll see that the math is incorrect.
How many hours do you say you owed him, sir?
The last paycheck, we owed him 37.5 hours.
Okay. Did you pay him?
Yes, we did.
You did pay him.
We issued him a check, yes, ma'am.
Did you ever get a check from them for 38 hours?
37 and a half hours.
You did?
Yes, ma'am.
So what did you do with that check?
I contacted Mr. Daguerrepoint and I asked him why I was not getting paid, first of all, for the $8 an hour that I was supposed to be getting paid, and that I was shorted hours.
Just a second, you mean he paid you less than $8 an hour?
Yes, ma'am. He cut my pay to $5.15 an hour.
Did you do that?
Yes, we did.
Why did you do that, sir? That's going to cost
The
you money.
fact that the contract, that oral contract that we had with Mr. Gorbash was one that he had agreed to work till December 24th. But he not only didn't work to December 24th, he quit 20 days early, failed to give us any reasonable time to find a replacement, even though we begged him to. And I just felt that
unilaterally cut his pay.
I felt that he breached the contract and I was no longer required to pay the agreed amount.
Judge Judy continues in a moment.
Come on, listen. I wasn't born yesterday. Being a Santa Claus at this man's age is not something that you sign on for with an annuity. You don't say, well, if you're a good Santa Claus, in 4 years, we're going to give you more money.
And later today,
You left the defendant with your father's phone card.
Right.
Your father got a whopping bill.
She made $849 worth of phone calls, plus taxes and fees, which came out to $1,015.
Big talker.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Father phone card. Sit.
real cases, real people. Judge Judy. Department store Santa Melvin Gorbash says promoter Don Daguerrepoint owes him for work. Don says Melvin breached the contract when he didn't show up for work.
All right, I'm going to ask you this question, Mr. Daguerrepoint. Mr. Gorbash, I believe, based upon what little I've seen of him, wasn't doing this job for money, necessarily, because if he was doing the job just for money, he certainly wouldn't have quit. Right?
Right.
He had a good time doing it.
I agree.
He's retired. You get a pension, sir? Or-
Yes, ma'am. I'm on medical retirement.
So he doesn't need these extra couple of bucks. Tell me about the $12 an hour that you discussed with him when you spoke on the phone. Did you ever say to him, Mr. Daguerrepoint, salary is between $8 and $12 an hour?
I told him the salary was $8 an hour, yes.
You mean he's just making up the fact that $12 an hour was mentioned someplace in your conversation?
Well, I may have said that we pay Santa Clauses between $8 and $12, but
That's what I
Santa Clauses
That's
make
what I
$8.
just said, Mr. Daguerrepoint.
Well, you asked me.
That you pay him between $8 and $12 an hour. So he didn't get the $12 an hour out of nowhere.
Right.
Now, you did, in fact, have a conversation with him after he got his first week's pay, and he called you and said, what happened to the $12
No, he
an hour?
didn't say that.
He never called you after he got his...
He met with me personally and said...
Met with you personally. So he
where
met with
are
you...
the $10? He never mentioned 12, he mentioned 10. But he has a little problem with math, so I'm not surprised that he didn't know 10 and 12 are different numbers.
Mr. Daguerrepoint, he had a conversation with you, and he said, what happened to the original let's say $10 an hour.
That's what he said, Your Honor.
And then you said, well, I told you that we paid between 8 and 12, and we're paying you 8?
No, I told him that the starting salary was at 8, but that I would throw in a dollar bonus if he stayed to the end as he agreed. Your Honor, I would have paid him whatever he asked if he would have stayed. In fact, this was a wonderful Santa Claus, and we did not want to lose him, and I didn't care what we had to pay him. He will hopefully remember me saying, Mr. Garbage, I was going to pay you the $10 an hour. Can't you please come to work like you agreed?
Why didn't you pay him the $10 an hour initially that you had initially discussed with him?
Because this is what we start all our Santa Clauses off.
Come on, listen, I wasn't born yesterday. Being a Santa Claus during Christmas season at this man's age, right, is not something that you sign on for with an annuity. So when you sign on for it to work for 6 weeks, you sign on for it with a certain salary. You don't say, well, if you're a good Santa Claus, in 4 years, we're going to give you more money.
I never said
He may
that.
be
Your
delivering
Honor,
in the
I never
North Pole
said
in
that.
4 years. Mr. Dagrapont,
That was never said by me, Your Honor.
I want to tell you something, Mr. Dagrapont. I find your testimony a little bit slippery, to say the least.
Well, I'm sorry
I
to
find
hear
it a
that.
little bit slippery, and I tell you that for, among other things, that you had absolutely no right, because if I believed what you said, you had absolutely no right to cut his pay unilaterally from the $8 that you said you were going to pay him to $5. You didn't have a written employment agreement with him. If you had, he would have known exactly what he was going to make, not between 8 and 12 or 8 and 10. So you decided that he had to be punished for leaving you? What'd you do with the check that they sent you, sir?
Well, I cashed it because I needed the money.
Let me see the check. Exactly what it was. Because you certainly are entitled to the difference.
Your Honor, if I may.
Last check.
Just a second. The last check you sent him was for $178.36.
Right.
That was net. The gross
Right.
was $193.13.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I don't like to deal with change. You don't mind if I don't deal with change, Mr. Gorback?
No, it's okay. He cut dollars. If you want to cut a couple of pennies, it's okay.
Okay. Mr. Gorback,
Yes.
today's Christmas for you.
Thank you.
Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $175, which is the difference in what I consider, sir, the amount that you owe this gentleman. That's all.
Parties are excused. You may step out.
Thank you. Oh, down in Louisiana, we don't go ho, ho, ho. You go ha, ha, ha.
He's a wonderful Santa Claus, and I'm hoping that he'll work for us in the future.
I love being Santa.